Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a Valentine's Day barn with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. I'm going to go over brushes, colors, and materials that we'll be using to paint this one. I will be using a traceable for the barn, so this is going to be printed out on one sheet of paper for the 11 by 14 inch canvas. And we'll be doing that after we paint the main background of this. And I use a sheet, this is called graphite paper. So if you use some of my traceables for the tutorials, you place this face down, shiny side down, and then you position your template in trace. You only need one sheet of paper and it really lasts for a very, very long time. And brushes, so there's 3 different brushes for this. The 3/4 flat, 12 bright, which is like a 1/2 inch flat, and a number 4 round brush. A T-square ruler is going to be used to just draw one line in this. We'll draw our horizon line with the T-square ruler. Also, I want to point out that a black paint pen might be helpful for this. I don't use a black paint pen, but I noticed that some of the outline work would be easier. So some of the outline of the door and part of the roof area and heart is done with a regular paintbrush, but it might be more helpful to just use a black paint pen for that. And colors, there's 7 colors in this tutorial, and I like to use Liquitex Basics paints. You can use whatever paint you have available. So Brilliant Purple, Quinacridone Magenta, Light Pink, Pyrrole Red, Primary Yellow, Mars Black, and Titanium White. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm using 11 by 14 canvas, and you can do this on any size. So whatever size canvas you're using, I want you to go ahead and find the center of this. So because this is a landscape type of painting, it's very helpful to just figure out where that horizon line is. So that's the line that divides our land and our sky, and that's going to be helpful for our first part of the painting, which is painting the sky. My canvas is 11 inches high, placed in the horizontal mode, so I measured 5.5 inches from the bottom and then did a horizontal line across. And now I have my paint palette loaded with the 4 colors: Quinacridone Magenta, Titanium White, Mars Black, and Light Pink. I'm going to start at the top of the sky, and I'm going to make this really pretty deep magenta color. So we're going to add like a dot or 2 of black into the magenta, and it's going to really darken that. You only need to do tiny, tiny bits of that black, too much, and you're just going to make black. You're going to make a very, very, very dark, deep, pretty magenta color. And that's the top of this sky. So it's a very dark color at the top. And it's a sunset, so we're going to get lighter and lighter as we work our way down to the horizon line. So with my 3/4 flat, I'm just going to go all the way across and paint like an inch with this very dark magenta color. So you may want to find that you maybe add a little bit more black in it if you want it to go darker. I'm going to go down with more of the pure magenta. So without rinsing the brush, I grab that magenta and I'm going to blend that up into that darker area, and it's going to blend wet on wet. I'm actually going to take more of this black. I'm going to go back up. Just going to be really careful not to add too much black in there. If you find that you accidentally add too much black, you can rinse and wipe your brush off and then load more magenta in there and blend that in. So my next layer of color is going to be light pink mixed with magenta without rinsing the brush. So I might get a streak or 2 of that black, but that's okay. As long as there's not too much black on my brush, we're good. And I'm going to take that color, I'm going to blend that below magenta, and blend that up, wet on wet. Your sky is going to look different from mine because when you're loading your brush in different amounts of these colors, and that's okay. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine. Our goal really is to create a sunset by making our color get brighter as we work our way to the horizon line, because that's where the sun is, that's where the brightest part of our sky is. We have this unique combination of purple and pink. And that black makes that really kind of mauve color. I'm going to take this and just kind of blend it in. I'm leaving some streaks in there of unblended color, and that's okay. A few streaks of this darker magenta. You can play around with your colors too. And then I'm going to leave maybe about an inch of space on the bottom of the horizon line, and I want to rinse and start over because I really want to brighten that part of the sky up. I don't want to introduce too much dark down there. So I'm going to rinse, dry, start over, and I'm just going to grab white right now. I'm going to take my white right there above the horizon line. I'm just going to blend that in wet on wet. That just means that that wet light pink in that area is blending with my wet paint on the brush. So it's wet on wet blending. And you just brush over it several times, and that's how you get your color to blend. You want to be careful in your pencil area because that paint will smudge your pencil line and then you'll get gray in your sky, and that won't be very fun. So just try not to blend over your pencil line too much. And I'm just going to keep taking this and blending that lighter pink in with the white. So now we have our lightest color on the bottom and our darkest color at the very top. And it might be tempting to go back and keep blending your sky, but you don't need to do that. I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to load my palette with primary yellow. And this is going to create that kind of warm glow that we see in our painting. So we have only pink in our sky, but I'm going to introduce a little bit of that yellow. So just a little bit on your brush is needed. And in this area on the left is where we see that kind of yellow glow in the sky. So a lot of the barn is going to be covering up the area on the right side of the painting. I'm taking yellow, blending that in, yellow and white. You just only want to do little tiny bits of yellow because that yellow is kind of strong. It might take over too much of that bright area and blend it up. It's going to turn into a very light, kind of pale yellow. We could bring it a little bit over here to the right. But again, we don't want to over blend it. So I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I'm actually going to let my sky dry before doing the next step. I want to paint mountains next, and I can't do that if my sky is wet because these mountains are actually going to be going up and overlapping part of the sky. So I'm going to dry all of this really quick. So when it's dry, and this is the color Brilliant Purple. And I'm going to switch to a number 12 bright brush. We might be using a little bit of the light pink color in there as well. But for now, let's do Brilliant Purple and white. So mix about equal parts purple and white together. Take your little flat brush. So this is like a 1/2 inch flat brush or 12 bright brush. I'm going to use the end of the brush to draw my first mountain. It's going to start on the left about an inch above the horizon line, and it's going to dip down into the middle of the painting. So I'm mixing purple and white together, a little bit of water in there to kind of loosen that up. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. It's going to dip up about an inch and down in the middle. Then I'm going to start filling this in. So this is just the color on my brush, the purple and the white. And we're going to go down below our horizon line at this point. And really our goal right now is to start, right now our goal is to paint this mountain, but we are going to be, I'm going to make sure the edging of that is nice and smooth. Creating layers in our landscape here. So this mountain back here needs to be darkest at the top and blend to white at the bottom. So I'm taking my white and I'm blending it up into the mountain. I grab a little bit of pink and have fun with that. Maybe some streaks of this light pink in there. That blends very pretty. But when you create that gradient of dark at the top and light on the bottom for your mountain, that creates some an illusion of distance in your mountain. So it's dark at the top, light on the bottom. Get some atmospheric perspective in there. I'm just going to keep bringing this down a little bit further. And we're going to do another sort of layer in here. Bring this down a little bit. So it's like 2 inches below that mountain. I'm going to rinse my brush off here to start over. And dry that off. I'm going to start my next layer with just some pure white. So this is still the 12 bright brush and white. And we're going to end up, because this is white, it is going to end up blending a little bit. I want to just use the end of it to kind of paint / draw another kind of layer of hill, even though it ended up blending with that, but that's okay. Let's switch to my 3/4 flat. So I'm just taking this white and I'm kind of just filling in this area. So over here, taking the end of that and dividing another sort of hill right here that cuts the bottom part of that mountain. So now I have a different layer of land right here. And that white should be lighter than the bottom of the mountain. It should be pure white. You might have to, so when that dries, we'll go back and we can add another layer of bright white and divide that a little bit better. I'm taking this, bringing this down. So now I just need to fill the rest of my canvas with snow. And I'm going to take purple and do another kind of area. So that part ended up being light and it started to get a little bit darker towards the bottom. I'm going to create another division right here with the white, and this part kind of cuts the hill and diagonally goes down this way. I'm going to grab some more dark purple and blend that up so the bottom of that hill is darker on the bottom and lighter at the top, kind of opposite of what we did with the mountains way in the distance. And down here, we're going to do darker, and we want to blend this to lighter at the top. So I'm going to do, I did the brilliant purple, so just the purple on the very, very bottom of the painting. And then I'm taking white and I'm blending that up. So we have different variations, different tints of this purple that kind of divides our land up. Even though it's completely a snowy landscape, we're adding shadowing in there to kind of define different areas of our land. I'm just blending that up. So this down here is all kind of like the foreground in our painting. All of this back here is very, very light, almost pure white with little bits of light purple. We also want to keep that area mostly light in color just because when we paint that barn in that kind of dead space area, we don't want it to be too dark because then we'll end up having to do multiple layers of paint on our barn and to prevent the background from showing through. So try to keep that area lighter. I'm going to take white and try to kind of define the top of this hill a little bit better. It's still wet, so it's still blending, so I might just need to wait for that to dry before I could take that and divide it up better with pure white. Same thing with right here. And back here, making the top of that mountain just a little bit darker. But again, it ends up blending too much. So yeah, we can go back and redefine that after it completely dries. So I let this dry, and here's my pure white 3/4 flat. I'm going to go back here and define the edge of that hill with more white. And then the edge of this one with more white. And then right here, I'm actually, and this part actually doesn't matter a lot because when we add our barn, we'll be able to define some snow that's kind of piling up on the side of the barn. So what I did down there is pretty optional because we can add that later. And then right here, a little bit more white to define that edge of the hill. You want to make sure everything is dry because we're going to be doing the template tracing next. I'm going to dry my painting and get my template ready. So again, this is printed on a regular sheet of paper, and I'm going to be using graphite paper. So you want to make sure that it's shiny side down. If you don't do shiny side down, it's not going to trace. So I've traced very intricate things before on a canvas and not realized it wasn't shiny side down until it was too late, and that was frustrating. So shiny side down. And I'm actually going to position my barn. So see this edge of the wall? That's going to be 1.5 inches to the right edge of the canvas. And the dotted lines on the bottom actually line up with the bottom edge of the canvas. So just if you're using a different canvas, just leave, or a different size canvas, leave a little bit of space on the right side of the barn because there's some trees in the background over there. So just kind of push it over a little bit. It's not center, it's off center to the right. And then you want to press pretty firmly with your pencil and take your time. It's a structure, and structures get kind of tedious with all those angles and straight lines. So just take your time in tracing it and double check by just kind of like holding it firmly, but lifting up and checking to make sure that your lines are showing up on your canvas. Using a pencil that's not super sharp. So I find that if you're using a ballpoint pen or a super sharp pencil, it ends up kind of poking through too much and making your line kind of thin and not super visible. So using not a like a completely dull pencil, because that's not fun to use, but a pencil that's not super sharp, if that makes sense. That makes it show up a little bit better. And again, you want to press firm, but not too hard. You don't want to poke through the paper. So when you have everything traced, you can lift up, and that's how visible my lines are. If you want to, you can go back and trace over it darker if that's helpful for you. But if you can see it, then we can go ahead and start painting the barn in. This next step is going to utilize the color Pyrrole Red and a number 12 bright brush. So we are basically going to paint the entire front part of the barn. The barn is like a 3/4 view of it. We're not going to paint the side of it yet. We're just going to do the front part, and that's all going to be red. There will be some darker colors blended into this, but for now, let's just solid red. So you want to take your time with this, with the different angles of this. If you need to switch to a round brush, in fact, I will be switching to a round brush when I go around that heart. That might be helpful. Use the end of your brush. You get kind of a straight line if you just use the tip of the brush. You can cut in on those angles. But then everything else in the middle, you want to do full width up and down paint strokes. So I'm going to grab my 4 round brush so I can go around this heart. I'm going to go around the negative space of this heart without losing that shape. So far, I don't see any coverage issues with this red. Pyrrole Red is actually a really opaque color. So if you look at the paint bottle, it's a solid square, and that tells you the color is opaque. Versus this is Naphthol Crimson. That one has a half solid square. So that means it's semi-transparent. So if you're using a different red, and it happens to be a semi-transparent red, you might have coverage issues, meaning you'll see background showing through. If you have that problem, you may have to paint your barn white first, let the white dry, and then go over it. You could also just do multiple coats of the red until it really just covers it up. Or when we do some of the shading color in this, um, that might disguise some of those darker colors, especially the darkest part really is the dark mountain back there. That might, like mine, it's actually showing through a little bit, but it ends up being disguised in the end. So again, using the end of the brush to really go around all that shape. I'm not going to paint over the barn door right now. I went around the barn door. Right here, I'm going to go all the way to the edge without going over the edge where that side of the barn is. Next, I'm going to rinse the round brush off, set that to the side, and use my 12 bright brush. So I didn't need to rinse my 12 bright brush. And mix a little bit of Quinacridone Magenta in with your Pyrrole Red. That's going to make it just slightly darker. I'm just going to take this and do a few random kind of vertical paint strokes in here and leave it kind of unblended. That's going to start giving my barn some color variation, and just with vertical paint strokes, we're trying to get this kind of rustic effect with the red barn. I'm doing this without altering the shape that I just filled in. I'm just adding some darker streaks with that magenta in there. And it's blending with the red. Then I'm going to add a very tiny bit of black into my red. So I'm going to take red, tiny bit of black. So just like earlier when we painted the sky, when we added a little bit of black into our magenta, we're doing that to the red. So we made a dark brick red color. And this should be dark, but not black. So it should show up as a very, very dark kind of maroon color. And that is what we're going to paint the side of our barn with. I find adding just a teeny bit of water in there helps with the flow, although you don't want it too liquidy to where it's dripping. And I'm just doing the end of my brush to really sort of kind of define the shape, and then full width vertical strokes to fill it in. I'm going to use my round brush to go around this window because it's a smaller brush and I can get in there and do some smaller painting detail work with the smaller round brush. So go around the window, and everything on the side of this barn is that dark red. And then I'm going to take my round brush and add just a teeny tiny bit of black in there for the purposes of doing a little bit of outlining right here and kind of dragging that down, because the bottom or the top of these walls below our roof need to be a little bit darker and shadowy. So that's why I'm taking this black and just kind of dragging that downwards. And this is just the area that's going to be below our roof, and dragging that dark, dark color on there. Next, I'm going to add darker colors to the front part of the barn. So I am going to switch back to my flat brush. Of course, you can also do this with the round brush if you felt like that was a little bit easier to control to get your darker colors below the roof. So I'm going to rinse and then grab my red, mix a teeny bit of black in there just to get it that really kind of pretty much the same color as the side of the barn. And I'm going to take this and I want to drag little vertical paint strokes. And this is the area that's just under the roof, and it would be casting some shadow there. I could also do a few strokes kind of randomly throughout the barn as well. That gives it more of that rustic look, and you just want to be really careful. So like right there, I added a little bit too much black to my brush, and if that happens, you can wipe the brush off really quick, grab some more red and blend it in a little bit more before it gets too crazy. And then, so just these little vertical kind of paint strokes. My first layer kind of dried a little bit. There are some areas that are still kind of wet, so it is blending. So if you need it to blend, I would say maybe add more red to it so it's not super dark. And then outline the edges of that roof, drag it down. That gets you your kind of that rustic red painted barn look. I'm adding a little bit of shadowing on the outside of the barn door as well. I'm going to take my round brush and that dark red color and go around my heart. So the negative space around the heart shape. So this heart will eventually have like a white trim color, and then it'll be pink on the inside, but this would be the shadowing part of it. So I outlined it and kind of did more of those vertical dragging paint strokes. I'm going to use this also to outline the gambrel roof. So you want to be careful with these angles. You want to make sure that you have two different angles with this barn style roof. So see how it segments and changes. So I'm outlining that right there. This is the part where you could use a black paint pen, although not when it's wet, but when it dries, you can use a black paint pen to outline that. And then I'm going to do the other side of this heart. So next, we are going to paint the snow on the roof. So I'm going to rinse this off. This is the number 4 round brush that I'm rinsing off. You may need to decide at this point to switch your water out because this red is pretty strong. Get all that red off of that brush. And then we want pure white. We don't want it to turn a light red color. So I'm just going to take this and start on the left side, and there's snow on this roof, so that just means that it's thick, and also the edging does not have to be perfectly straight because the snow wouldn't really be straight on the edge, although right here on the edge of the barn, I did that one pretty straight. So I did that as close as possible to where we did that black outline, so where there's nothing still showing through, so we shouldn't see any sky in between the roof and the red part of the barn. But on the edging, so the top edge, that part can be a little bit uneven. And remember, the roof has the barn style gambrel roof, so we want to make sure the angle changes. So here's where it gets tricky because it's a side view, and so this part still goes down, and we have the little other part of the building at top that we haven't forgotten about yet, that we haven't painted yet, but I'm just going to go and fill in where that the template is. So the snow kind of goes this way because we have another part of the building sticking up in the center. And then this part, I'm going to change the direction of my paint strokes to go more at an angle this way with the roof because it goes down. And I'm going to I'm going to add some more white to my palette, but I am going to start getting some darker colors in there as well. I think it's probably best to just fill it in solid white first. So just white, fill in your entire shape, outline the edging right here. It might start to disappear a little bit from the snow in the background if that's that same color, but we can deal with that. So again, solid white, these paint strokes are going down at an angle this way. And then right here, we can kind of like curve our paint strokes a little bit. So they're going like at an angle, and then we can fill them in, kind of going curved. So if you're a little intimidated by the shading of the snow on this, you actually could just leave it solid white without doing shading if you want to simplify this painting. So I'm going to take this purple, and you want to do this before your white dries. And so remember how we painted it dark on this side? Well, the snow needs to be dark on this side as well. So we're using this purple to darken the snow. I'm actually going to outline this bottom edge. So I'm going to take this purple, and I'm leaving a gap of pure white in there and outline this angle as well. I'm going to add just a teeny tiny bit of black in there. It's going to make it like a gray purple color. And I'm just kind of doing angled outline, and then down here as well, kind of curving that corner in there. So I have kind of a dark grayish purple lower right corner area on my snowy roof. I'm going to take this, again, leave a gap. And right here, it's going to be a little bit shadowy because we have a piece of the structure that's kind of sticking out. I want to outline this right here because that's where the angle of the roof changes. And I'm just dragging the little gray strokes downwards. I'm going to do a few more kind of horizontal paint strokes, but I'm leaving this not blended all the way. And then I'm going to drag a few more over here, again, not blending it all the way. I'm going to add a little bit more of this purple gray shadow on the left over here. So this part of the roof right here outlined, that kind of helps it to stand out from the snowy background, but I'm only adding the shadow towards the bottom, but leaving the top white. Next, I'm going to start painting in that little pop-up building in the barn. I'm going to do this by doing the snow part first, although there's really no rhyme or reason why I'm doing it in this order. If you wanted to paint the red part first, the red part of the building first, if that makes more sense to you, you can do it that way. I already had white on my brush, so I'm just painting it in like this. I'm going to shadow this side of the roof. So you want to add your purple gray color and just make sure you're painting at an angle going this way, but leaving the outer kind of perimeter of that more white. So just do it in the middle part. So next I am rinsing my brush to start again with some fresh white, and I'm going to do the outline of the barn doors. So if you want, you could actually just paint the barn doors first and then do the outline if that makes more sense to you, but I'm going to do the outline first. And so that is, you can see that in the tracing where that line, that rectangle outline trim of the door is. That's just solid white. And I'm not going to do the white trim, like the X's and that heart on the door yet. I'm going to do that after I paint the red part of the door. But I am going to go ahead and outline the big heart that's at the top. So this one gets white outline. And if you end up going outside the lines a little bit, if like this white ends up overlapping parts of the red, that's okay. So the heart has white edging to it, and then on the inside it's going to be painted pink. So I'm just doing the outside perimeter of the edging of this heart. So you can see how painting that shadow earlier kind of helped make that look a little bit three-dimensional. Right now I'm painting the perimeter of the window. So this window over here on the right has a white trim to it on the outside or inside of that shape. So that's white. You can go outside the lines a little bit if you want to. And then now I'm going to paint the little watchtower that's on the top of our barn. So I'm going to rinse the brush and then load my palette with some more of this red. So the Pyrrole Red color. And we'll do the same thing. So we'll do solid red or bright red on the front part and then do our darker red on the side part where it would be a little bit more shadowy. So I'm just going to do, you can like outline the shape. I am going to go around that window. So there's a little square window at the top. And then the side of this is that darker red. So this one we mixed a very tiny amount of black into the red. And if you want, you can mix a little Quinacridone Magenta into it. And then so you outline and then all vertical paint strokes. And then a little bit of shadowing on the front part. I'm going to paint the barn door in next, so I'm going to switch back to my number 12, so my little flat brush, and do the red part of the barn door. So I'm going to paint the bottom part of it first, and this is just the Pyrrole Red, so no other color mixed into it. I'm just going to do this bottom half of it. I'm kind of dividing this up into two sections, the bottom half and the top half, because I don't want to lose my the white sort of X patterning that's going to be on the front of the door. So I'm doing just the bottom half right now with that pure red color. And now I'm going to grab my number 4 round brush and I'm going to do the top half with a darker red color. So I'm going to go around that heart. And so now I know where the top half and bottom half are. So when it's time to do the white lining on this, we can know where that is. Of course, if you want to paint it differently, you can. If it makes more sense to do the white X's first and then paint the red in between, you can do it that way. Or you can just paint the entire barn door solid red and then divide it up after that. This is just the order that I went through. A little bit of water in there, especially if you do like these tiny areas, it gives you a little bit more control, a little bit more flow of the paint to get into those small corners. I'm going to get my flat brush and add just a few of the darker streaks down here and kind of just drag it up so it's a little bit more shadowy on the bottom. Next, I'm going to do the light pink color that's on the inside of the big heart at the top of the barn. So I'm going to take the color light pink and I'm mixing a little bit of Quinacridone Magenta in it, and that's making it just slightly darker. If you want to, you can just use light pink, but I wanted to make it just slightly darker to make sure that this is covering any of that dark matte back there. So I'm just painting this in using the number 4 round brush. And if you end up messing up the white outlining, you can always go back and redo your white lining after this pink heart dries. If you want to do like a little bit of color variation, you can add some darker tones in there on one side and then blend some lighter tones on the other side. Next, I'm going to paint the windows. So I'm going to get some fresh primary yellow and also some nude titanium white on my palette. So I'm going to paint the windows with yellow and white mixed together and a clean number 4 round brush for this. So about equal parts yellow and white together. That white just makes that yellow a little bit lighter and brighter and also makes it have good coverage over any part of the background that might be dark. So I'm just going to paint the inner part of this. If you end up messing up the white outline, you can always go back and repaint the white outline after the yellow dries. And I'm going to paint the window in our little tower room up here. We did not do the white outline for this yet, but we will after this yellow dries. I'm going to add some more snow detail, specifically snow that's kind of piling up and overlapping parts of the bottom of the barn. So I'm going to rinse the brush and grab some fresh titanium white. So down here is where I'm going to just do a little bit of snow that's kind of overlapping the base of the barn. And you can just kind of like drag it down. This bottom part of the snow area is a little darker because remember we painted some darker purple down there. So this bright white should show up. You can do a little bit of snow that's overlapping the bottom of the barn. And if you want, you can grab a little bit of purple and kind of just do some random curvy left and right paint strokes of purple and white that gives it like some shadowing in the snow. And I'm going to start working on my little path there here. So do you see the two sort of sections of like tire marks or some kind of like path road thing leading to the barn? So in between those, I'm going to do little curved paint strokes of snow on each side. So here I'm doing curved strokes on the left side of that. And then in the center, same thing, little curved white, pure white. We're not really shading anything right now. Try not to get some yellow in there because my white is really close to the yellow on my palette. Little white curved strokes, but I'm leaving the path blank. So now we can see kind of this darker area of purple where the path is because that part was not painted at all just now. And if you want to, you don't have to do anything else to the path. However, I am going to darken my path next, and I'm going to use black to do so. So I'm going to take some black, mix white into it, so it's like actually a really, really dark gray. And on the very, very bottom of this, I'm just going to start by doing like left and right horizontal paint strokes. And so the bottom part is very, very dark, and then it gets slightly lighter as we approach the barn door. So add more black to your brush for the bottom part, and then when you get towards the back, add white to it and kind of blend it a little bit. So we create perspective by making it lighter and closer to the door and darker towards the bottom, but also the path, notice how it gets wider, bigger at the bottom and more narrow towards the door. So I'm only painting in between the snow layer that we just painted. I'm not going to paint over that, or I guess some of it kind of overlaps it. And if we want, after this dark path dries, we can go back and touch up some of the snow that's in between and on the sides of the path. Next, I'm going to rinse and I'm going to work on the barn door detail a little bit more, specifically the heart and then the outlines on the door. So I am just using titanium white and the number 4 round brush, and I'm painting this heart solid white, and then the doors. So you can see where we still know where the division is, where that dark and lighter red is. So that's where that white line goes across. And I'm just doing a thick white line. And then we can do a line down the center, and then an X, and an X. And then I'm going to do a line right down the bottom. So we can touch up the outlining of the door if needed. I went ahead and let everything dry, freshened out my water, and now I'm going to do some outline detail work. So here's the part where a black paint pen could actually be really helpful for this, but I'm going to use my number 4 round brush. I'm going to start with the window lines over here and the window on the right. So it helps to kind of water your black down just slightly and then really kind of twist your brush to get those bristles to gather into a point. I'm going to do the little window plus lines. So the one in the middle kind of goes diagonally and goes parallel to the top and bottom of the window. And now I'm outlining or loosely outlining the inner part of the window. And next I'm going to do this one. We still don't have the white outlining on this window yet, but that's okay. We can kind of go in a different order here. So this one, the entire shape is outlined, and then the little plus in the middle of it. And then on the bottom and the side of this, same thing right here, very, very loosely, not even like the whole thing, just like maybe half of it and release. And right down the center of this heart is where the door is. So I'm doing the center of this door in between that white line. If we want, we can outline this entire heart. Sometimes outlining is kind of like a creative decision that you make with your painting. So maybe there's something that you want to kind of be more bold and stand out. It might be different from what I'm doing. Outline that top part of that white part of the door. We could just outline this inner shape. Or if you don't like the look of outlining, you can completely skip all of this. I'm going to do loosely this bottom part of the door. And now I'm outlining the inner part of this heart. And next I'm going to rinse and go back to white and do some touch-ups with the white. So I'm going to touch up the white part of this, which you may find that you don't need to do, that if you don't need it to be touched up, you don't have to redo that. And then next I'm going to do the door handles. So those are red or reddish pink or whatever color. You can even do black if you want. I'm actually going to make they're like little circles right here. On the tracer, it shows them higher up, but the tracer doesn't really have the full shape of the lining of the door. It's just a line. So if you want them to be higher up, you can, or if you want them to be here, I'm having them go overlap on the white lining of the door. But you're definitely welcome to change that if you want. Or even the whole style of the barn, you can change colors and patterns. And then the window, as long as that black outline is dry, we can do the lining of this window. So many details in this barn. I love painting reflection in snow. So I'm going to take yellow and white. So this is yellow and white on my round brush. And just below the window, I'm just going to do some loose left and right paint strokes of yellow and white, and that's from the reflection of the window. Such a pretty touch. Also, purple and yellow go very well together. I love the purple and the yellow in this. It's because they're contrasting colors, so they end up complementing each other when you pair them in a painting. So that is really pretty. And let's see, some other detail work we can do here. I'm actually very loosely outlining the bottom of this roof right here, and I'm going to outline the edge of it too, just so that this can stand out a little bit better from the landscape because it's the exact same color as the landscape behind it. So our barn is finished, And now we can have fun with some of the other things in the painting, including this tree over here on the left. It's going to be a cherry tree. It happens to be blooming, early spring, sort of snow, just a pretty whimsical element we can add to our Valentine barn. You also don't have to paint this kind of tree. If you want to leave it kind of simplified, you can. I'm going to do this. So this is a little bit lower than the middle of the painting, so it's not level with the bottom of the barn. It's a little bit further back, kind of the mid part of the barn on the left side of the painting. And I'm going to start, this is the number 4 round brush. I like to use black that's a little bit watered down. When it's flowing, when it's a little bit watery, it kind of helps you to create these flowy sort of paint strokes. Sometimes it helps if you start at the end of the branch and stroke down. So you start with like a very, very thin, light paint stroke, and then you put more pressure on it to make it bigger. So we want our branches to be bigger at first, or smaller at first if you're starting on the end, and then you stroke down and put more pressure on the brush, and it makes your branch thicker. So we can take this. I like to start at the beginning of the branch and let go of my brush so my paint stroke gets lighter, but you can do it both ways. And you can do as many branches as you want on this tree. I'm going to go and add white highlighting into the tree. Also optional, you can just leave your branches black without doing any highlighting. So I'm just taking this, and you have to do this before the black dries so that it can blend in there, but little bits of white on the brush without rinsing. And I'm just doing loose paint strokes in that black, letting the black and white kind of gently blend. And that creates different variations of gray in it to kind of give it a little bit more depth. The other types of trees I'm going to paint are little pine trees that are way in the background, and this really just adds detail and depth into our landscape. So I'm going to take my black. You can even lighten it if you want to just do like a medium gray color, but I'm just going to do a line down the middle, and these are tiny. And then paint strokes going down to form branches. And then when this dries, we can add snow onto the trees. And I'm going to do a second tree over here. So because this is closer, we want to make it slightly bigger. And then another little guy way back here. The next thing I'm going to do is this fence. So if we're feeling pretty confident, we can just paint it in. I'm going to draw it out first with a pencil. So I'm just going to sketch a very, very basic fence, starting with a large fence post over here in the lower left corner. This is going to have a little bit of snow piled on it, so I made the top part have an oval so it looks a little bit more three-dimensional. However, when we paint this in, it's not really going to matter how three-dimensional it looks. And then diagonal line for the horizontal beam, and then each fence post, so it gets a little bit smaller as it kind of goes in the distance. And if you want, you can completely skip the fence if you're not feeling like painting a fence, but I felt like painting something over here in the lower left. Another cute idea would be like a snowman, or like maybe a Valentine's theme snowman if you really like to paint snowman. And I'm just doing this solid black. Ooh, or even a mailbox would be fun too. Each post is solid black, and then like the top part is a little oval, but you really don't notice it because it's all solid and there's no other, we're not doing highlighting on this quite yet. And then so each post gets slightly smaller in the distance. And then you can do your horizontal fence post or fence beams. These, maybe they go off to the left and off the canvas. Then we can do white on this. So I'm not going to do the snow on that. I'm going to do like a little bit of highlighting. So before that black dries, just take your white and just kind of gently blend that in. So vertical on the fence posts, horizontal on the horizontal beams, and that just gives it a little bit of color variation. Next, I'm going to do some more snow kind of piling up around the fence. And so like kind of on the bottom of the posts, you just want to make sure you're not like dragging some of that black into that, but because that's dark purple down there or darker purple down there, we can do some pure white and do a little bit of like snow texture on the bottom. This next step is optional. I think adding the little cherry blossoms adds a whimsical touch to this. You could even paint little tiny hearts on the trees or hanging little hearts. That could be fun. But we'll just call this an early blooming cherry tree. And so I'm just doing pink dots. I'll do pink, I'll do quinacridone, we can even do red, we can do white, so a lot of variety of color in here. And then I'm going to add some snow on the trees in the background with titanium white. So with these, I like to start on the bottom of the trees, and I'm doing the same kind of branch strokes, but I'm going from the bottom to the top, but I'm not covering all the black. If you cover all the black, then you can have a solid white tree. So you want that black to kind of show through and create shadowing. And we'll just say it's snowing very lightly, and I'm going to do little snow dots kind of scattered throughout the sky. And if our fence is dry, we can do little bits of snow on the posts and on the beams. And the last thing I'm going to do to this is add a little bit of shadow under the trees. I'm going to make my shadow color from black and purple, the brilliant purple with a little bit of black, so you make your grayish purple color. And I'm just going to take this and maybe a little bit more white in there so it's not super dark. So I'm going to kind of drag that to the left side and actually add a little bit more white and maybe drag it a little bit more to the right side as well. Some more white on my brush, and I'm just taking this and bringing it gently towards the right so it's a little bit more even. And that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint Valentine's Day barn. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.